Okay, so this is the question we are talking about today. How come there is no socialism in the United States? And so everybody keeps saying that it says, can there be socialism after communism? I'm looking through Google Scholar again here. I'm going to. Okay, what happened to this book? Oh, okay. So I'm just going to read through a little bit of these books. Communism, Socialism, and Democracy. This is by David Owen. It used to be said, well, communism has its noble aims, but evil methods, and fascism, evil aims, and evil methods. Socialism has the distinction of combining noble aims and noble methods. I constantly extol the underlying nobility of the values and beliefs of socialism based not as enemies maintain on collectivism and bureaucracy, but on altruism and a commitment to a more equitable society. These values are combined with an unwavering support for the necessity to submit to the verdict of the ballot box, not born out of reluctant acceptance, but out of conviction and respect for the judgment of one's fellow being. Democratic socialism, dedicated to alleviating poverty and redressing inequality, cannot base its appeal on self interest. It relies for support on persuasion, not on coercion, on an appeal to the altruistic element in all of us. It's very easy for anyone committed to the philosophy of the left to conclude that with its emphasis on the disadvantaged minority, a free electorate will never be able to sufficiently persuade. Therefore, some argue that it is permissible to forego could be regarded as the luxury of democracy. Many on the left who become communists justify their stance in such terms, believing that only a single party can push through essential reforms and that only a single party can ensure the necessary discipline to put right the evils and inconsistencies in society. These authoritarian, traditional Marxist Leninist views are um, anti-theist theists of democratic socialism. Today, there are few questions regarding a more urgent and considered answer from democratic socialists than how to deal with the Communist Party in Europe. It's an urgent question because a number of countries' communist parties claim to have changed and specifically to have abandoned their subservience to Moscow and acquired to commitment to parliamentary democracy. The power and influence of communist parties in a number of European countries has given added urgency to the question. In Italy, the Communist Party, with 34% of the votes in the 1976 parliamentary elections and a long involvement in regional and local government, is now the second most powerful party. In Spain, Senor Carrillo's defiance to the Soviet Union seems to be making him into a popular figure, and the communists are major political rivals to the PSOE, or Democratic Socialists. In France, where support for the communists appears to be falling, communist electoral support was nevertheless sufficiently large for the socialists and the left radicals to have reckoned with it in forming the left coalition. Oh my gosh, we are getting somewhere here now with all of this. Can there be socialism after communism? This is by John E. Roemer. Definitions of socialism and public ownership. The economic failures of the communist model can be tracked, I think, to the conjunction of three of its characteristics: public ownership of firms. That would mean the American public would be owning the firms. So if these companies are required to actually include the American public as in ownership of these firms. Okay, I found this is journals.sagepub.com /DOI/ABS/10.1177 / and there's a bunch of numbers after this. So what that would mean, public ownership, as in the American public owning ownership of these companies, not the companies being one person or one CEO, but the American public having an invested interest related to these companies, then things would be ran completely different, wouldn't they? And number two, the allocation of many goods to central administration rather than by markets. And three, political dictatorship. This is what we're dealing with right now. While it does not logically follow that a successful economic model must reverse all three of these features, most observers assume that they must be the case, that an efficient economy requires private ownership of firms, the market allocation of goods and services, and political democracy. The view of the author is that the market allocations of goods and competitive politics are necessary, but not the private ownership of the firms. While there is a general consensus on the meaning of the market, well, that I like that idea actually, is that when they say that their view is that the market allocation of goods and competitive politics are necessary, but not the private ownership of the firms. But the private ownership would be required to actually include the American public as owners. While there is a general consensus on the meaning of the market allocation and competitive or democratic politics, public ownership is a murky concept. It has come to mean the state's control of the firm's policies, entitlements to its profits. If we return to Roman law for the definition of ownership, then public ownership should mean the right of the public to use and abuse its assets as it sees fit. Social choice theory has taught us that the public's preferred use of collectively owned assets may not even be a well-defined concept. I shall have nothing further to say about money is assets, isn't it? Money is assets. I shall have nothing further to say about this well-known problem. Rather, I would like to note that public ownership, so defined, could give rise to capitalism, not insidiously, but because the public might decide to auction off its assets to the highest private bidder. So there's a big difference when you have public assets, as in one person owning them versus a collective. So if the American public owns something, then the American public would have to vote on it in order to sell it off or not. So it'd be kind of like, for example, when you have a Wall Street company, they vote on things related to who their next CEO will be. They vote on things, they have their board, and they vote on things related to how their money will be used and things they do like that. And so I therefore find it useful to define socialism not as a system in which there is simply public ownership, but as a system in which there are institutional guarantees that aggregate profits are distributed more or less equally in the population. If public ownership would bring this about, then it is consistent with socialism, but perhaps, of course, there's no guarantee can be complete in a democracy, nor should there be. The point is that the situation for equalizing profit income should be politically stable. The solidaristic. Okay, I think I'm going to end it at this point. Thank you to those of you who did tune in and listen to this. This is an interesting topic, and I will include some metadata in the video description below so you can find where I'm talking about. I'll leave the titles, and then you can search them on Google Scholar. That's where I went to, was Google Scholar.